This is The Camp with Zach Heilprin and the Athletics' Jesse Temple.
Yes, welcome into the camp. I'm Zach Heilprin. No Jesse Temple today. He had a conflict, was unable to attend practice and unable to do the show today. So he'll be back with me very, very soon. We'll get into practice in just a second. Before we do, wanted to, again, push our social channels. We're trying to expand a little bit here with the camp. Obviously, we have our YouTube page that we've been pushing, and we certainly would appreciate you going and subscribing and watching there. We obviously appreciate everyone subscribing and listening wherever you are right now, even if it's obviously just a podcast. We also have an Instagram account. It is the Camp Podcast. Go check it out. Could be posting some videos, doing some graphics up there that maybe we won't be posting elsewhere. So please give us a follow there. And as a reminder, we are sponsored and brought to you by, in part, by Home Field Apparel, the best vintage gear that anybody who's making. It's officially licensed, 150 colleges, including Wisconsin, but there's a lot of other really, really cool designs that they have from non-Wisconsin schools that are up there on their website, homefieldapparel.com. Check them out. All right, so Wisconsin's practice today, about 2 hours, and about a lot of scrimmaging, a lot of 11 on 11, and there was plenty to get to. I kind of feel like the best way to do this is to go position by position, and I'm going to start with probably the injury news, because I think that is maybe the most important aspect of what came out of today, is that Jake Renfro, who was penciled in as Wisconsin's starting center at least in spring, he went down in spring for a majority and had a foot injury and was lost for much of spring, so he's kind of being a backup going into fall camp. He started to get a few first-team reps last week, or the last time we got to see practice, which was about 10 days ago. So it felt like maybe he was moving up, and then they were going to be able to maybe move Tanner Bortolini to guard, and that is now very much on hold because Jake Renfro is dealing with another foot injury. It's a foot injury to the other foot, not the one he hurt in spring, but his other foot, and it's a foot sprain. We talked to Coach Luke Fickell after practice today, and he said it's like a 3 or 4 week thing. Do they expect him back for week 1? Probably not. Do they think they'll have him for week 2? Maybe. It's certainly not a guarantee, but at some point, hopefully, to get him back and into action. He has not played in a game since 2021, obviously, because he went and missed all of last year with Cincinnati with an injury. He was working some of the rust off when we saw him in camp earlier this month, and that continues to be something that I think he is going to have to do because he hasn't played football in such a long time. So even if he does get back, it feels unlikely, and there's no guarantee, but it feels unlikely that he's going to be able to jump up and grab that number 1 spot and be their starting center for a large majority of this year. Now, again, he's played football, a lot of football for Luke Fickell, so they know what he can do. They don't necessarily have to learn who he is, but the injuries putting him behind the 8 ball here in terms of what his impact could be, especially early in the season. So offensive line-wise, while we're on it, not much has changed for the offensive line since we last saw practice. Still Jack Nelson at left tackle, still Joe Huber at left guard, still Tanner Bortolini at center, still Michael Furtney at right guard, and still Ryan Malman at right tackle. Now, some guys get some work in there with them. Trey Wettig got a little work at left guard in place of Joe Huber. He's also been at different times working at right guard as well. So there was not a whole lot different with the first line. The second line, there was a little bit of a change. Nolan Rucci, who the 5-star offensive tackle from Pennsylvania, who's been almost exclusively at left tackle, got some reps at right tackle. Like his first reps that we saw today were on the right side, and he doesn't look out of place there at all. He is certainly athletic enough to play anywhere on the line, but it's an interesting move because then they put Trey Wettig on the left side and got him some work over there as well. I don't know if that's getting Trey Wettig potentially ready if Jack Nelson were to go down. I don't know that. Nolan Rucci also then did get some work back at left tackle later in practice too. So he's kind of flipping and flopping and moving each side. But offensive line wise, there's not a ton of movement. There's not much different. Luke Fickell was asked after practice whether he had his 5 starters, and it doesn't sound like he does. It doesn't feel like they're locked in there yet with that starting group, but we do have a little bit of a clearer idea of where Jake Renfro is in terms of whether he's going to be able to help them early in the year, and it doesn't sound like, at least early in the year, that's going to be the case. The other position that's been hit hard by injuries is tight end. We already knew going into camp that they were going to be without Jack Eschenbach, be without Clay Cundiff, both those guys no longer with the program. You then go and lose. You're without Cam Large as well. And now you're without Riley Nowakowski, who moved to that position from fullback and was one of the better surprises for people in the spring. He is now done with a foot injury for 3, 4, 5 weeks. They're not positive. It's a very similar injury to Jake Renfro's injury, which was a foot sprain. So we'll see how long Riley Nowakowski is out. He was in a boot. He was on a scooter, and it doesn't seem like he'll be back anytime soon. So today, and Jack Pugh's still away from the team or away from practice. He's dealing with a personal matter, and the hope is to get him back, but they're not sure. Luke Fickell is kind of like if you have a knee or you have an ankle, you kind of know when you're going to be back. With Jack Pugh and his personal situation, there's no time on when exactly he will be back. So that's a little bit tough, and it leaves them very, very thin at the tight end position. Today it was Hayden Rucci, it was Tucker Ashcraft, it was Colt Dokovich, it was JT Seagreaves. Those were their 4 tight ends that they had. So, and I want to say it was Rucci. Actually, it was Rucci. I know it was. He had one big play, cross the middle, wide open, about 20 yards down the field. Nice little crosser from Tanner Mordecai. That was essentially the only big play from the tight ends. However, Mordecai loves throwing to Hayden Rucci. He threw to him at least 4 or 5 times in the scrimmage today. And a lot of the time, he's not overly open, but he's such a big body that you can throw it to him and allow him to make a play and feel good about that. The ball's not going to end up in the other team's hands. I don't know that is necessarily what they would want to do the entire year. I think they'd like to have a little bit more explosion out of that position. That's not to say Hayden Rucci can't. I think Hayden's had a great fall camp that we've seen. I think he's been a bit of a surprise, quiet surprise, because he's dealt with injuries himself. He's missed a large amount of time with injuries, but he's been there throughout fall camp, and definitely right now to me is their starting tight end. That said, I think a guy like Tucker Ashcraft, who has a little bit more juice to his game, could probably also be a big part of this. And he was running with the first team. And we know even before the injuries popped up, he was getting some run with the second team and was really pushing for time. And now it's kind of by default that he's in there, but it's still something that I think they feel really, really good about. And he is a guy that I think's got a bright future at that position. He hasn't stepped on the field and played a game yet. Still very young. Can't remember the last time a true freshman tight end played a big role at Wisconsin. It's been quite some time. So he probably will, though, whether it's through his talent, which I think is immense, or whether it's through need because of the injuries at the position. But we'll see how that plays out for them at tight end. The other spots that I wanted to talk about offensively, wide receiver, they continue to make plays and plays and plays. Now, they are also dealing with a little bit of an injury bug there. Keontez Lewis did not practice today. He was there, was throwing the ball around. Not exactly sure what the injury is there. It looked like it's lower body, but we were not told. And Skylar Bell dropped out of practice early. Didn't appear to be a big injury, like a major injury by any stretch, but he was still on the sideline. We'll see if that is something that lingers. But they were without those two for much of, Keontez Lewis didn't practice. Skylar Bell was there for about half of it and then dropped out, which allowed some other guys to make plays. But the guys making plays are the ones that make plays throughout fall camp. It is Bryson Green, CJ Williams, Chimere Dike. Will Pauling's also back. Last time we were at practice, he got hurt. He's already back and practicing and doesn't appear to have any limitations and was not as involved today as I've seen in the past, but the other guys were. Bryson Green had a great, and it was a really nice throw from Braden Locke right down the right sideline. He had beaten his guy by a couple yards. Ball was a little bit out in front of him, had to go dive for it, make the play. There's actually a picture of it up on UW's Twitter account, X account, whatever the hell you want to call it, that shows him leaping. You can't actually see the catch. I'm sure they'll have the video of the catch at some point. Probably is already out there by the time you're listening to this too. But it was another great catch, another big time play from Bryson Green, which is exactly what I would expect from him this year. I think he is going to be just absolutely dynamite for them on the outside. And it's also noteworthy that he and CJ Williams were sharing first team reps a lot more so than they were the last time we saw practice. Bryson Green, I feel like, is pushing CJ for that spot. And CJ, I think, is kind of feeling it. And later in practice, he caught 30, I think it was a 32-yard touchdown from Braden Locke. Just a beautiful ball, right? A dime right in the bucket. And he held on. It wasn't even held on. He just a great ball, and he had beat this guy, and he was right on top of him, and he was able to go in for the score. So CJ Williams making plays. Chimere Dike had maybe one of his better catches of camp. He's had quite a few of them that we've seen. And this one was in the red zone. Tanner Mordecai, third down, throwing it up, but he knew that the DB had his back to him, and so he couldn't really see it. So he threw it up. Chimere went up and got it in the corner at the side of the end zone, two hands, double toe tap, got it in for the score. There were officials there, so I know that he got his feet in because they called it in. Now, whether replay would have overturned it, who knows? But it was a hell of a catch. He got a little contact on his way to the ground and still held on, and he got up, and the entire offensive sideline was going crazy. So there was a lot of good plays from those three guys. I think they really stood out. The one thing I will note about the tight end room, and this was kind of something I asked Fickle about, whether they could potentially move anybody into that room. And he laughed and said, we have thought about it. And then he mentioned two guys that are versatile and could potentially do it. One is Jackson Aker, who played fullback last year, is now at running back, but has the body type to play tight end. I believe he kind of lined up in that role a little bit his freshman year when they were at Rutgers. If I'm remembering this correctly, it might have been in warmups when they were down fullbacks, and he, maybe not. Probably not thinking about that straight. Irrelevant either way. He's versatile enough to play tight end. Fullbacks and tight ends were kind of interchangeable the last few years, so he kind of has that ability to do it. And the other guy is, why I bring it up while talking about the wide receivers, is Chris Brooks Jr. And a guy who, we have talked about. It was kind of him and Tommy McIntosh, two bodies that are big and kind of have, you would think, the physical ability to play a little tight end. Tommy McIntosh, a little bit taller, a little bit thinner. Chris Brooks Jr., thick. I don't know what else to say about that. He's thick, and he's strong, and he has the ability to push people around. And so we kind of saw him a little bit in that role today, getting the ball out in space, also being a blocker. I think he could do the job if they needed to at tight end. He's almost, he weighs 225. Some of their tight ends are right around 230. It's just like he's not tall. He's kind of similar to Riley Nowakowski. He's about 6'1", 6'2". And so that's plenty tall enough to do some of the things they want at tight end, but it's not, Hayden Rucci 6'6", or, Cam Large 6'4", or Tucker Ashcraft 6'4", 6'5" type of stuff. So that's the difference. He just doesn't have necessarily the height that goes along with that position. Some other things on offense, quarterback wise, I didn't think it was a bad day by any stretch for Tanner Mordecai. There were some really nice throws. There's some really good plays defensively. There were a few balls here and there that you may have wanted back, but he didn't turn it over at all, which again, I think is the biggest thing that I'm looking at for him, just based on his history. There were times where he, got in trouble with some turnovers. So has not necessarily made any of the dangerous throws outside of a couple to Hayden Rucci in traffic. But again, the throw to DK was great. There was a couple more throws over the middle that were dimes. So he was good. He wasn't bad. He was Mordecai. He was steady. He was steady. Braden Locke was a little bit more up and down. Some amazing throws. The one to CJ Williams, the one to Bryson Green, like both of those were really great throws. There were some others that he probably would want to have back. But again, that is kind of what it's been with Braden Locke. A lot of good and some bad, but he'll keep chucking it. He'll keep chucking it. Quarterback wise, Miles Burkett maybe had his best day and moved the ball, period. An absolute dime bullet across the middle for a first down deep in the red zone. And he later took the ball in on what would have been a quarterback keeper. It was an option. He kept the ball, went in for a touchdown, would have scored even without whether they were tackling quarterback or not, he would have scored. So he maybe had his best day that we saw. It was not a great day for Nick Evers. He got 4 plays. It wasn't great, and he got pulled after 4 plays, and Miles Burkett took the reps from him. So still very much a work in progress, I think, with those guys. Running back wise, Braylon Allen had a couple of impressive carries where he kind of showed again the burst that we kind of saw down in Platteville a little bit, that, a little showing some patience, showing some vision, but then when you see the hole, go. And he did that a couple times today. Ches Malusi had maybe the spin move of camp. CJ Getz was on top of him almost from the time he got the ball, and just spun him. And we were talking about it in the stands. Would he have made that tackle if it was in a game? Because you're not tackling at this point. I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have made the tackle. It was a great move from Ches. Great move from Ches. And took off around the side for what would have been a nice gain. Jackson Aker and Cade Iacomelli both now still working with those threes, or I should say the second group essentially, but they're working for that number 3 job, and they kind of shared carries. And I don't think that either one of them really jumped out today. So that is what it is. Going to the other side of the ball, as I said before, very little changed in terms of the lineups. It was still the first team defense was still, when they went in their dollar package, it was still the 3 safeties with Wohler and Travion Blaylock and Kamoi Latu, the corners, Jason Maitre in the slot, Ricardo Hallman, and Alexander Smith on the outside. The linebacker, CJ Getz, the outside linebacker, hand on the ground, was CJ Getz, and then the 2 defensive linemen, Rodis Johnson and Gio Paez. But then some other guys got some reps in there too. James Thompson Jr. did, and some of the other defensive linemen that are making some noise. Ben Barton, also Darian Varner has gotten a little bit of run with the second team. Again, they're still trying to find there's 7 guys that can play up there. We also saw, and then 2 inside linebackers were actually Jake Chaney and Mumajong Meta, and the second group was Tate Grass and Jordan Turner. So but as we talked about with Jesse, they have 3 starters there at linebacker. CJ Getz, I think, is a guy that, and Luke Fickell was asked about him afterwards, he doesn't do anything that just jumps out and hits you in the face like great, but he's so steady. And then he'll make these plays. He made a TFL today where he's, and that's exactly what they want out of their defensive ends. And essentially that's what he is in their 3-3-5 or that dollar package. They want chaos. They want guys that are going to play on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And he's got that ability. He is as good of a run stopper for an outside linebacker as you can want. It was this pass rush thing that he wanted to step up on, and he has. But a lot of it is creating chaos and getting away from guys and playing in the backfield. And he did that on one play today. Jake Chaney blew up what would have blown up what was a swing pass out to the outside, would have absolutely destroyed the guy. And Mumajong Meta, despite playing with this cast on his hand, despite playing with this big club, continues to make plays. He is relentless. And we mentioned this on our last show, but when he's coming, man, when he's coming on the blitz, there are not people that want to pick him up, especially because what's coming, especially Wisconsin guys, because what's coming. Maybe the first time a guy in a game does it, he won't know what to expect, and he'll stick his nose in there. But after a couple times, Mumajong Meta is going to make guys, tense up when he's coming through there, and then all of a sudden he can slip them. He can do a little dips because he's got he's a little bit shorter, so he has the ability to cut corners and cut angles very, very quickly. And we saw that today a little bit. Trying to think of some of the other linebackers. Darrell Peterson also is getting some run in that CJ, in that hand on the ground defensive end position in the dollar. So it feels like, in spring, he was kind of working in the dollar spot, right? Like it was when Hunter Wohler wasn't in there, Darrell Peterson was back there. It feels like they've kind of said no to that and put his hand on the ground. And we know how good of a pass rusher he was in high school. He put up, I think it was 25 plus sacks over his final 2 years in high school in Ohio, in a really good high school program. So that'll be a good spot for him as well. Cornerback, I should say safety-wise, Kamoi Latu, man, he loves to hit. He loves to hit. And he came on a blitz, and he came on a blitz unchecked, and he came on a blitz unchecked from the blind side today. Luckily for the Badgers quarterbacks, he couldn't hit him. But whoever that quarterback would have been, an opposing quarterback would have been, I'm not sure they're getting up after that hit. He was coming hard. He didn't hit anybody. He didn't do anything wrong. But if that was a game, I would feel bad for the quarterback because he was coming. And when he hits with force. And him and Hunter Wohler both, and obviously Travion Blaylock too. Just go down the line of their safeties. All their safeties are guys that are going to come up and knock you around. Preston Zachman and Austin Brown, like they have a ton of guys that love to hit. And Kamoi Latu would have taken whatever quarterback was there out. Secondary wise, at the corner spots, not a ton of big plays today for the offense. I mentioned a few of them, obviously, but not a ton of big plays. And that had a lot to do with what Alexander Smith and Ricardo Hallman continue to do, and Jason Maitre as well. They have not given up a ton of big plays. Most of the big plays that we've seen, especially today, outside of, no, actually the Chimere DK one was too. All three of the big plays that were made that I mentioned before came against the second team defense. The Wisconsin corners, the starting corners, have been locked in. The backups, whether it's Jonas Clona or Nazir Forkarine, those are two guys that are continuing to get better, continuing to get some reps. The third team was a mixture. Some of it was Amari Snowden. Some of it was Jace Arnold. Like some of these guys that we have seen some time, not even seen time. Some of these guys, like Jace Arnold, who play in the spring, now working with the third team. Amari Snowden coming in not late, but in the summer, didn't come in as an early enrollee, working with the third team. Still remarkable, his size. The only guy that can make Tommy McIntosh not look tall is Amari Snowden. So he's going to make some noise at some point. Special teams wise, we got kicking, a little bit of kicking, 5 kicks. Van Zelst and Vakos each hit all of their kicks, and I'm going to have to look this up a little bit here before I give it, because I don't want to be off on the numbers here. Van Zelst hit his extra point and hit from 35 yards out. Vakos was good from 31 yards out, 41 yards out, and also an extra point. So that's still Vakos. And the punting job, Atticus Bertram still working with the first team. And there's some video up on our YouTube page of him punting. There's one punt. Can't tell how far it goes, but it looked all right. I mean, if you want to do a deep dive, maybe you can figure out how long it was. But some of the people in the stands might have that. Maybe a Colton Bartholomew has that at the State Journal. I do not. So all in all, an interesting practice. All in all, an interesting, stretch. A couple guys or a couple people in the stands that noticed. Obviously, Barry Alvarez was there, and Don Davey, former Badger defensive lineman, former NFL defensive lineman, was there as well. The officials, as I mentioned, also there, which was interesting because it was a pretty flag-heavy day. And this was kind of what I was referring to when you talk about, I don't know, are they being sloppy or are they not? When you don't have the officials, you don't know. And when you have the officials there, it kind of gives you a better idea of exactly what things would go well, what things would not go well, whether they would be called for holding, whether they'd be called for pass interference. Like all those things pop up when you get officials there. And there were quite a few flags today. Now, I will say a lot of those flags, at least in my opinion, or at least in, my recalling of it, were some of the third string guys. It was, the young guys. There was a lot of flags with the young guys. The first team, not so much, but there were a few. And I think the officials, they brought them in starting last week. So they're getting a better idea of exactly what they can do and what they can't do. I wanted to run through before close it up here. I wanted to run through some of the guys that were not practicing, that I haven't already mentioned. Isaiah Mullins still down with an injury. Aaron Witt still has yet to rejoin things. Max Lofi, a guy who could potentially factor in as the backup slot cornerback, not practicing yet. Trechka Kahuna also still in a boot. and has yet to take part in any practices since coming. Kurt Neal looks to be working his way back. He has shed the crutches, is doing some running today, defensive lineman. So that was good to see. And I think that's it. I think that's it in terms of guys that weren't practicing today. So I believe that's the last practice we'll get to see. Who knows? But for now, that is what we have. And Jesse, again, will be back with me here in a little bit, and we'll get things going. 2 weeks from today, Wisconsin will be taking the field against Buffalo. Can't wait to have a game to actually talk about. Until then, or until next time, I should say, you've been listening to The Camp.